Legislators from both sides of the aisle gathering in the Fox cities to highlight the importance of affordable housing.
It was part of the Legislative Day event hosted by Greater Fox Cities Area Habitat for Humanity. One of the main concerns discussed is the lack of homes for those people to live in once they relocate to the Fox cities. The goal is to accommodate an expanding workforce as the region grows. Some of the lawmakers making an appearance today include Democratic Representative Lee Snodgrass and Republican Representative Rachel Cabral Guevara. Dawn Bulow, who was selected to be the future homeowner of one of the houses, says she faces many challenges in the townhome she currently rents, like mold problems and difficulty keeping up with repairs.
When I got the phone call, yes, I was surprised. Because I had an interview, 2 ladies at my house for an interview, and then the one called me that night, and the other, and she's like, "You're approved for the house," and I was like, happy tears,
Bulow also says she is looking forward to having a safe and affordable place for her 2 children to live in.